Well, if you try to radically change your diet, learn a new language, and start waking up at 5 in the morning all on the exact same Monday, I mean, neuroscience dictates that you are basically mathematically guaranteed to fail.
Yeah, it's a total system shock.
Yeah.
We are, culturally conditioned to want that cinematic montage.
Right, the dramatic before and after.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where you take a sledgehammer to your old life and instantly emerge as this highly optimized, perfect version of yourself. But when you look at the actual neurological mechanisms of behavioral change,
That sledgehammer approach just triggers an immediate fight-or-flight response.
it really does.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a genuinely fascinating piece of material today. On the surface, what we are looking at is a transcript from an everyday English language learning audio program.
Yeah, designed to help non-native speakers gain fluency.
Right. But beneath that very unassuming surface, it secretly holds an absolute masterclass in behavioral psychology and life transformation, really. The mission for our deep dive today is to extract the concrete, step-by-step framework hidden in this transcript on how to simplify the process of changing your life habits.
Without triggering that biological panic.
Exactly, or falling into the trap of burnout.
And what is so refreshing about this approach is the complete lack of academic posturing. Because it was built specifically for language learners, it bypasses complex, intimidating jargon.
Oh, totally.
But make no mistake, the concepts being presented align perfectly with advanced cognitive behavioral therapy and neuroplasticity. It just frames them in highly practical, everyday definitions that you can actually use.
And whether your goal is to master English fluency, get healthier, or just stop feeling like you are endlessly spinning your wheels, the exact same underlying mechanics apply. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
The material insists that the very first step of changing your life isn't jumping into action. It's actually, hitting the brakes. They talk about this universally recognized feeling of being stuck.
Yeah, they use an incredibly visceral analogy for this. It's the physical sensation of trying to walk in thick, heavy mud.
Yeah.
Like your feet just won't move. You wake up, go to work, come home, watch television, go to sleep, and the next day, the loop just resets.
It's exhausting.
Right. And neurologically speaking, this is what happens when your brain's dopamine baseline flatlines due to extreme habituation. Every day feels identical to the last because your brain isn't being challenged to build new pathways.
The heavy mud analogy captures that feeling of a rut so perfectly. To snap the brain out of this autopilot state, the transcript poses 3 deceptively simple questions you have to answer before you do anything else.
Okay.
What do I love doing? What do I want more of in my life? And what do I want less of in my life?
Those questions are essentially a diagnostic tool. They force your prefrontal cortex, the logical planning part of your brain, to wake up and assess your current reality, rather than just reacting to it.
I really want to zero in on that third question, though. What do we want less of? I think this is where most people get tripped up.
Oh, absolutely.
We tend to treat self-improvement like packing a suitcase for a long trip. You have this suitcase that's already completely stuffed to the zipper with your current routines, obligations, and stressors.
Yeah.
And instead of unpacking, you're constantly trying to cram more good habits in. You're shoving a new workout routine into the corner, trying to force the zipper closed over a new diet.
Literally sitting on the suitcase to fit in 30 minutes of daily meditation.
Yes. And
Okay.
eventually the seams just burst.
Because cognitive load is a very real, measurable limitation. I mean, your brain only has so much bandwidth on any given day.
Right.
You cannot simply add demanding new routines to an already taxed neural network. Changing your life isn't just about the acquisition of good habits. It is heavily dependent on the deliberate removal of the things that drain your cognitive battery.
You have to take the bulky, unhelpful items out to make space.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding your own specific friction points acts as a diagnostic mirror. It sets the baseline. You absolutely have to know what is taking up space in the suitcase before you can start aggressively repacking it with new goals.
Which brings us to the pitfall of taking the wrong kind of action once you've done that reflection. I actually laughed out loud reading this part of the material because it highlights a phenomenon every single one of us has experienced. The starting Monday trap.
Ah, yes, the great illusion of the fresh start.
We've all been there. You tell yourself, okay, starting Monday, I will wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym for an hour, eat 0 sugar, and memorize 50 new English vocabulary words.
And then Monday morning arrives.
The alarm goes off, and you just hit snooze and abandon the entire project. Why does this overwhelming urge to overhaul everything completely backfire?
Well, we touched on this earlier. It's the amygdala. Your brain is evolutionarily wired for efficiency, meaning it aggressively defends routine because routine requires very little caloric energy.
Oh.
So when you introduce 5 massive new routines on a single Monday morning, the cognitive load spikes. Your amygdala perceives this sudden, massive change as a threat to your survival equilibrium.
Wow.
A threat. Yeah. It panics, floods your system with stress hormones, and shuts down the prefrontal cortex, forcing you to retreat to the safety of what you already know.
So the ambition itself is actually weaponized against you.
Precisely.
To bypass that biological alarm system, the framework suggests taking almost embarrassingly small steps. Instead of an hour of exercise, you walk for 10 minutes every day for a month until it becomes an automatic behavior.
Because 10 minutes flies entirely under the amygdala's radar. It doesn't trigger that fight or flight panic response because the energy expenditure is just so low. You do it for a week, 2 weeks, a month. The central philosophy here is small steps, big changes. You are quietly laying down the physical neural pathways of the habit, literally thickening the myelin sheath around those neurons, long before you ever increase the difficulty of the task.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To build those small habits without relying on sheer willpower, the text introduces a concept called habit stacking.
I love this concept.
It's so smart. The idea is to take a tiny new goal and chemically fuse it to something you already do without thinking. For example, attaching a 5-minute reading goal immediately after you take your first sip of morning coffee.
Or committing to 5 minutes of English speaking practice right after you turn on the kettle for your morning tea.
Exactly. The source even outlines a concrete 7-day schedule for habit stacking to get this going.
Oh, right, the kettle example.
Yeah. Day 1, you just place your English vocabulary notes next to the kettle. That's it. Day 2, you touch the notes while the water boils. Day 3, you read one single word out loud. By day 7, you've seamlessly built a 5-minute speaking habit, and your brain didn't even notice the effort.
What's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism of that fusion. You are capitalizing on a neural superhighway that has already been built.
Right.
You don't have to summon the motivation to remember to read or practice English. The sensory input of the coffee or the sound of the kettle acts as an automatic established trigger. You are effectively hijacking an old routine and turning it into the foundational building block for a new one.
It's like a domino effect that you set up on purpose. But, having a brilliant habit stacking routine doesn't mean you're suddenly immune to mistakes.
Definitely not.
At some point, you are going to stumble. The framework dives deep into this, mapping out a very specific psychological cascade. Your thoughts dictate your actions solidify into habits, and your habits ultimately construct your life.
It's a chain reaction. If your default internal monologue is, I can't do this, or I sound stupid when I try to speak English.
Right.
Your brain accepts that thought as a biological fact.
Yeah.
Once that belief is logged, your brain cuts off the dopamine supply that drives effort. You stop trying. And when you stop acting, the entire cascade collapses.
We've all heard the phrase growth mindset a million times. I mean, it's a corporate buzzword at this point.
It really is.
But what this material does so effectively is strip away the cliche and apply it directly to the exact millisecond of a humiliating failure.
Yes, the dinner party story.
Yes. There is this highly specific, deeply relatable anecdote in the text about an English learner at a dinner party. And this outlines a whole narrative arc of transformation from a beginner to a confident speaker, but it starts with this awful moment.
It's so painful to read.
They wanted to politely say, "I'm full," after a large meal. Instead, they used the wrong vocabulary word and accidentally said something completely inappropriate and highly embarrassing.
Oh, no.
And the entire table burst out laughing.
That is the moment of peak vulnerability. For most adults, that is the exact second the amygdala hijacks the brain again, screaming at you to escape the social threat, hide, and just never speak the language again.
Okay, but I have to ask the hard question here on behalf of anyone who has ever felt that burn of embarrassment.
Go for it.
In that specific moment, when your face is flushed red, your heart is pounding, and everyone is lashing at you, how is anyone practically supposed to override that evolutionary panic? Telling someone to just adopt a growth mindset and laugh it off feels completely disconnected from human biology.
It does.
Our instinct is to survive and flee, not pull out a notebook and reflect.
This raises an important question about how we process social feedback. You are entirely right. The biological urge is to flee.
Right.
The learner in this story explicitly admitted they wanted the floor to open up and swallow them so they could stop learning English forever.
Right.
But the key to overriding that panic is engaging the prefrontal cortex to reframe the data.
Reframing the data, how so?
Well, the material uses a brilliant grounding visual for this. A baby learning to walk. When a baby stands up, takes a step, and immediately falls flat on their face, they don't experience a crisis of identity.
Sure.
They don't sit on the floor, analyzing the judgment of the room, and decide they are fundamentally flawed and should just crawl to work for the rest of their life.
Because they lack the social conditioning of the default mode network?
Precisely. They don't have an ego tied to the outcome yet. They just experience pure, unfiltered feedback. The fall isn't a failure. It is simply physical data that they need to adjust their balance next time.
Wow.
The overarching lesson for us as adults is to view mistakes not as an indictment of our character, but as our greatest teacher. Failing isn't the end of the process. Failing is the entire mechanism of the process.
Failing is the entire mechanism. I love that.
Yeah, if you aren't making highly embarrassing mistakes, you aren't generating the friction required for your brain to grow. And that learner from the story, they used that exact reframing. They stuck with it, leaned into the mistakes, and eventually achieved long-term language persistence and real fluency.
Which is incredible. But, a growth mindset can only survive if the soil around it is healthy, right?
That's a good point.
You can have all the internal resilience in the world, but if your external environment is constantly pulling you backward, willpower isn't going to save you. We have to analyze how social environments impact our personal motivation levels.
Absolutely.
The text leans into this by citing the famous claim that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
The underlying argument here relies heavily on mirror neurons. As social creatures, we subconsciously mimic the habits, the thinking patterns, and the energy of the people closest to us. If you surround yourself with positive, growth-oriented individuals, your brain normalizes that behavior. But if you spend your days surrounded by people who constantly complain or tear down ambition, your baseline slowly sinks to match theirs, often without you even realizing it's happening.
Wait, I have to challenge this because it sounds great in theory, but reality is much messier. What if you are stuck in a workplace with deeply toxic, complaining people and you need the paycheck?
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Or what if the negative influences are your own family members? We can't all just fire our coworkers or our relatives to improve our average. Does that mean our neural pathways are just doomed?
That is a very valid real-world limitation. But we look closely at how the framework defines environment. It actually provides an escape hatch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the environment is not strictly limited to the human beings you are physically forced to interact with. Environment encompasses every single input around you. It's the physical spaces you occupy, the algorithms you interact with, the media you consume, and the audio you pump into your ears.
Ah, so it's about curating a sensory diet.
Yes. If you have zero control over your coworkers, you assert extreme control over your broader environment. You can physically remove yourself during lunch and study in a quiet, focused library instead of the chaotic break room.
Okay.
You can put on noise-canceling headphones and listen to an inspiring podcast while sitting 2 feet away from someone complaining. You curate the microenvironments you can control. By changing those external cues, you slowly change the internal self, creating a protective buffer around your mindset.
You are basically building a customized protective bubble of good influence. Okay, so we've established the necessity of clearing out the suitcase, the mechanics of habit stacking, the biological reality of failure, and curating the environment.
The foundation is set.
Now, let's look at the daily toolkit. The material outlines 5 specific, simple daily habits to accelerate English-speaking progress. But really, the neurological benefits apply to literally any life change.
Let's walk through the science of them. Number 1 is to practice gratitude by writing down 3 things you are thankful for every single morning. And I know this sounds like a self-help cliche, but biologically, it is targeted cognitive training.
Right, it's not about feeling warm and fuzzy.
No, it's about the reticular activating system, or the RAS, in your brain. Your RAS acts as a filter for all the sensory data hitting you at any given moment.
Okay.
By intentionally writing down positive things every morning, you are programming that filter. You are actively training your brain to scan your environment for opportunities and positive reinforcement rather than defaulting to scanning for problems and threats.
Which lowers the cognitive load for the rest of the day. That's huge.
Exactly.
Number 2, move your body daily. We aren't talking about grueling, calorie-burning gym sessions here. We are talking about 10 minutes of stretching or walking to elevate your mood and physical energy.
And the mechanism behind this is crucial. Gentle, consistent movement flushes the brain with BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
EDN.
Right. Think of BDNF as high-grade fertilizer for your neural pathways. It promotes neuroplasticity, making it physically easier for your brain to wire in those new language skills or habits we just talked about.
Amazing. Number 3, learn something new every day. It could be a single new English vocabulary word or a tiny new concept. Just 5 minutes of intentional learning. And I have to bring up the math presented in the framework on this one because it blew my mind.
Oh, the compounding math.
Yes, if you spend just 5 minutes a day learning something new, by the end of the year, you've accumulated over 30 hours of dedicated learning time. 30 hours from a 5-minute window that you probably would have spent mindlessly scrolling on your phone.
It completely recontextualizes the compounding interest of time, which leads directly into number 4, rest well.
This one feels counterintuitive when we're talking about achieving goals.
It does, because hustle culture tells us that exhaustion is a badge of honor. But neuroplasticity, the actual physical wiring of the new habits and language skills you are practicing, does not happen while you are practicing.
Wait, really?
No, it happens while you are sleeping. Sleep is when your brain clears out adenosine and consolidates the day's learning. If you are perpetually exhausted, you are sabotaging the very physical changes you are trying to create. You cannot transform your life on an empty battery.
So true. And finally, number 5, be kind to yourself. The rule of thumb here is simple but incredibly difficult to execute. Talk to yourself like you would your absolute best friend.
Yeah.
If your best friend made a humiliating mistake trying to speak a new language, you would never look them in the eye and call them stupid. You'd tell them it's okay and they'll get it next time.
Because harsh self-criticism spikes cortisol, which throws you right back into that amygdala fight-or-flight panic we were trying to avoid.
Right.
Self-compassion keeps your nervous system regulated so the prefrontal cortex can stay online and keep learning. And what ties all 5 of these habits together is a critical safety net.
Which is?
The absolute biological necessity of celebrating small wins.
This makes so much sense. If you are waiting months or even years for a massive result like complete, flawless language fluency or a huge career pivot, it is deeply, deeply discouraging.
It's a guaranteed recipe for quitting, due to what neuroscientists call a dopamine prediction error. The human brain requires regular hits of dopamine to sustain motivation and forward momentum.
Okay.
If you withhold that feeling of success, stubbornly waiting until the absolute end of a multi-year journey to feel proud of yourself, your brain will simply run out of fuel. It will conclude the effort isn't worth the energetic cost.
So you have to manufacture your own motivation along the way. You have to map milestones for a beginner speaker's growth, for instance.
Exactly. Milestone 1 isn't fluency. It's just stringing a basic sentence together. Milestone 2 is surviving a 2-minute conversation at the grocery store without panicking. You have to celebrate the 10-minute walk. You have to celebrate retaining that single new vocabulary word. The framework suggests writing down one small win every single night before bed to hijack that dopamine loop.
They give a great practical example of this. Someone wrote down, I said no to an extra unnecessary task at work and used that time to rest.
That's a huge win.
It is. It's a massive behavioral win for setting boundaries, even if it feels incredibly small in the grand scheme of things. So what does this all mean for us? We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today.
It brings us to the final analogy the text uses to illustrate the importance of patience. Planting a seed.
Which again sounds a bit cliche at first glance.
It does. The material notes that you don't plant a tiny seed in the dirt and expect to wake up the next morning to find a massive, fully grown tree in your yard.
Right.
But if we expand on that through the lens of everything we've discussed today, it's really about architectural foundations. When you plant that seed, the initial growth isn't visible. It is aggressively growing a complex root system deep underground. It is building the invisible structural integrity required to eventually support the massive tree.
But because we can't see the roots, we panic. We go out there on day 3, dig up the dirt, and yell, "Why aren't you a tree yet?"
And in doing so, we destroy the roots. We do this to ourselves constantly. We start a new habit, we stack it to our morning coffee, and 3 days later we check our language fluency or step on a scale and say, am I totally transformed yet?
Did my life change?
Right. Real neurological change requires time, consistency, and immense patience, while those invisible neural pathways thicken.
Mm.
Checking for life-altering results after a week of small steps is the fastest way to guarantee you will quit.
You are building the root system right now, and slowly over time, compounding interest takes over and it grows into something visible. So, to summarize our journey through this framework, if you want to get unstuck from the mud, you have to start by figuring out what you want less of. Unpack the heavy items from the suitcase to lower your cognitive load.
Yep.
Do not overhaul your entire life on a Monday and trigger an amygdala panic. Instead, habit stack tiny 5-minute steps onto established routines you already do effortlessly. Adopt a baby's pure, unfiltered resilience to failure, realizing that public mistakes are vital data points, not character flaws.
Well said.
Curate your microenvironments, your headphones, your media, your spaces, to protect your energy from toxic influences. And practice those 5 daily habits. Gratitude for the RAS, movement for the BDNF, 5 minutes of learning for compounding growth, deep rest for neuroplasticity, and self-compassion to keep cortisol in check.
It is a profound, biologically sound, and highly sustainable framework hidden perfectly inside a simple lesson on English fluency.
It really is a Trojan horse of self-improvement. But before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something to explore on your own today that flips this entire concept on its head.
We spent a lot of time talking about attaching new positive habits to old ones, the power of habit stacking. But think about your bad habits for a second, the ones you desperately want to stop.
Yeah.
What old automatic triggers in your current environment are secretly stacking the habits you're actually trying to break? If the sound of a boiling kettle can automatically trigger you to practice English, what sensory cue in your environment is silently triggering you to stay stuck in the mud?
Ooh, that is a deeply uncomfortable but powerful question. If you feel like you are endlessly walking in heavy mud, maybe it's time to take a hard look at what is constantly pouring water on the dirt.
Until next time, protect your cognitive load and be incredibly patient with your progress.
Keep learning, keep rewiring those pathways, and keep stepping out of the mud. See you on the next deep dive.